There you go.
So I have with me now my two of my close friends, Jesse and Julia Liska. Welcome to Empowered Running. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're up to, what your ambitions are.
Nice.
Go ahead first. All right, I'm Julia, as Shaq said. I am an occupational therapist. I've lived in Cortez for about 2 years, married to this guy. Have two sweet stepdaughters who like to run with us sometimes.
Sometimes.
Currently working as an occupational therapist at an outpatient clinic, so I do a lot of rehab and fun stuff like that.
Do you see many running injuries?
I get to see some running injuries. I mostly see shoulders, so I see some injuries from falls. I think that's how.
That's actually how we met. Yeah, I had a fall with my dog and tore a rotator cuff because she kept going on the end of the leash. So
Pulled you over.
And Julia, what got you into running? What's your background with that?
Well, I grew up playing soccer from the age of 5, so I didn't really enjoy running per se, but I ran for soccer because I really cared about the sport. So I would run, not much, 2 or 3 miles, but on average for a full soccer game, you run about 7 miles. Of course, it's not all consecutive for a full game. So I did a lot of running, and then in college, I continued to pursue my soccer career. Midway through college, I decided I wanted to try out for the soccer team. Tried to walk on my junior year. Did not make the team, big surprise. But I did train really hard for it, and that's actually what led me to try my first half marathon.
Which college was that?
Wheaton College, outside of Chicago. And then after that, it's kind of like, maybe I move away from soccer and get into running more. So I realized it was pretty fun. Thought that a half marathon would never be achievable, and then once I did it, it's like, maybe this is possible. So.
Yeah, and you said that average soccer player runs 7 miles during the course of a game. Is that true for soccer players in general, or is that because you grew up in a small school where everybody's playing offense and defense the entire game?
That's probably
and they don't
true.
Switch them out.
Well, and I was playing the full game, so yes. Yeah, and it depends on where you are. If you're a midfielder, you're running back and forth. I was a defender, so I was probably running 5 to 6 miles a game.
Yeah.
But they were sprints, so.
There's that. Yeah.
And Jesse, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. You maybe don't identify as a runner, right? But you do a lot of running.
Right.
And that's connected to your whole family and your history.
In a way, yeah. So I grew up in Cortez, and then shortly after high school, I joined the Army and did a lot of running in the Army. But prior to that, running was always kind of a staple in our family. We would go to this, I'm half native, and we would go to this, I'm half Hopi, and the Hopis have this celebration in September called the Twanama Run. It's in celebration of Louis Twanama, and there's a fun run, a mile, a 5K, and then a 7 mile, I think is what, or a 10 miler or something like that. Anyways, and so growing up, we would go to that, and it's on Shimopi, which is on Second Mesa near Palaca, Arizona. And we'd go there, and we'd participate. And I remember participating when I was 8, 9, 10. I think the last time I did any of it was 14 or 15. And I haven't been able to go since, just because time constraints and family and everything like that. But growing up, that's what we kind of did. And there was two people that I really looked up to. One was my uncle, Uncle Denny. It was Dennis Bohico. And he was a phenomenal runner. And I learned more about him later in life. But early on, as a kid, looking up to this person and him doing all these crazy races, and then also doing the Twanama and him being there, and he was just this real jacked Indian, when you see Last Mohicans or something like that, that's what his physique looked like just no facial hair, just 6-pack, lean, just sinewy muscle,
just chiseled,
what an Indian should look like. Not this, but no, but he was learning about him later on in life. I learned that he did some really amazing feats. He would participate in the man versus horse race in Prescott. He won 6 times in a row.
And what's the distance on that?
That's 50. I think that's 50 miles. And then another one was he's done multiple marathons, participated in the Twanama. different things like that. And then his dad, my granddad, Irving Pohico, was, participated in multiple marathons, one being the Boston Marathon. I want to say it was like 96 or 98 that he was actually invited to go. I don't know all again, you're 96, 98, like there's not social media, there's just, hey, we're looking at you to come, or a mail or something like that. So there's not a lot of tracking it or anything like that, but he participated in the Boston Marathon back then. And I don't know, like just running with Hopis has always been kind of a staple. And growing up, that's kind of the same thing. And then going into Army, and learning how to run and learning how to breathe and do all these different exercises that come along with that. But I don't identify as a runner. I run because Julia runs, and it's good for me. And that's kind of where, and we have 2 little girls, and teaching them how to run and be active in that is kind of a new thing for us. They're 9 and 7, and so trying to get them to understand that, like, hey, running sucks and it's not always fun, but it is something that's good for you and challenges you and pushes you. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
Yeah, and when you're working with your daughters, do you work some of those cultural aspects in and kind of tell them about your
they know where they come. They know where they come from. My grandparents passed away in 2022, and both girls attended the funeral, and so they understand that, like, hey, we're Hopi, and this is what Hopis do, and this is kind of, we participate in that. They haven't been able to go to Tawanama. They want to, but they understand that this is something we do and we participate in. And when we're running, I try to encourage them and think about the people who aren't able to run anymore, not only physically, but emotionally or spiritually. Like our Nani, we call her Nani, she's not able to run. And so we run for her. We run for Papa. We run for Uncle Denny. We run for, we run for Grandma. We run for Grandpa. And we do this in a way that, like, we're able to we're able to run in their stead, right? And so kind of celebrating that, or trying to get them to see that. And there's a quote by Uncle Denny, had this quote, or that he would say, and it's on some things, or it was the coolest thing, like when his what do you call it, placard, or
the bib?
The bib, the bib. He would write like a journal entry on the back of them.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and on some of the quotes, like they're hilarious. Some of the things, like uphill still sucks, like still suck doing that.
Uphill every single
time. And like there's other ones like he talks about, like, you have a lot of time out when you're running on these crazy runs, like 120 miles, and all you have is time to think, and it's one of the only sports where it's just you, right? Like, you don't have team necessarily, you're not dependent on anybody, it's just you. And that's something I struggle with, as an individual, and trying to make it work for myself and not depending on somebody else. But, getting back to this quote, it's like it's just you, that's all you have, and you have all this time to think, and so you think about the people who can't run, or you say prayers for them, or whatever else. And so getting the girls to understand that, and trying to, just find a place, you try to find the runner's high, you try to find this space in your head where you can just go and not think about anything and not think about the suck, and just try to drive forward.
Yeah, when I run in the morning, I find that it's a good time to work through the issues that I've got coming up in the day, and things I got to think on. You really hit on something key, though, running for people who can't run.
Right.
And I just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge there's a lot of men and women that enlisted at the same time as you that can't run now.
Sure, absolutely.
And, on behalf of the audience, whoever may be listening and everywhere, I want to thank you for your service, and I want to thank them for their service as well. Yeah. And that's a good thing to remember. I don't know when this is going to go live, but we're in the week of the 4th of July now. We're going to celebrate our independence. We just came off Memorial Day a few weekends ago, and it's important to remember that we get to run because others have sacrificed for our freedom, and we should never take that for granted. Some of the areas you served in, without getting too political here, I think I can dare say that your wife and daughters couldn't go for a run by themselves.
There's certain areas, like the political climate, whatever you want to call it, the governments in power in those countries, they're not too keen on women's rights or keen on women's independence. And so, yeah, I agree that there's definitely there's a privilege to running, and I think that's something that I've learned not only like as an individual, but more so than anything, like as a husband with Julia, because Julia's, she sees these injuries and stuff, and she sees these people wanting to, and she talks to them. Well, you can share that, like talking to your patients and being like, yeah, I'm going for a run this afternoon. Oh, I wish I could do that again, or and
Got
there's
that
countless
a lot,
stories. Yeah, a bunch of stories like that.
Yeah, and I was just healing on my shoulder. There were some people in there working on knees and hips, and I don't know what takes longer to heal or whatever, but yeah, you see that often in your occupation, those who can't run or maybe won't get back to running the same way they would. And it's a great lesson to take away, to remember those who can't run when we have the ability to use our bodies. And Julia, tell us about your experience while we're not in Afghanistan or Iran. What has it been like for you running while female? That's the name of an article that was in Runner's World that says something about 40% of women experience harassment or worse while they're on the run, everything from catcalls to being followed to whatever. Have you had any of those experiences? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had a perfect experience today. I was like, wow, maybe this happened on purpose because I'm going to do this podcast. I was running, going out past Hawkins, and there were a couple of guys standing in the corner, and one of the guys came out and started running alongside me. And it
Were they
wasn't
like in
really...
gym clothes, or were they just...
No, he was just in normal clothes.
Really?
Came out, started running next to me, and I was going... My pace was pretty quick, so he wasn't keeping up, but he was running alongside me, and I couldn't understand what he was saying. I thought maybe he was asking for money, but his hand was out like this, so I just gave him a fist bump, little knocks for good lucks, and kept running. As I kept going, he said, "Proud of you." It's like, thanks, man. Have a good day. Yeah, just came out and started running next to me. Which, as someone who hasn't had any really negative experiences, even still, it's like, it sends up red flags when somebody comes out and starts running towards you, and you're kind of more or less alone. There's traffic going by. And then on the way back, I intentionally tried to avoid that street, and yet still happened to run by him and his friend, and they were yelling at me, which I didn't understand what they were saying. But stuff like that will happen. Not every time. Sometimes I'll go out running and I don't get any attention at all, and other times I'll go out and I seem to get noticed by everybody and their brother. So,
do you think there's like a component of like you running by yourself and not with the dog? Do you think there's that component, or do you would you advocate for people to like wear less revealing clothes? Like how do you? Because for somebody like that's not a big deal, right? For you, it's not really a big deal, but for somebody else, that's like, that's borderline harassment. So what do you?
I'm always dressed the same no matter what attention I'm getting. I'm always wearing the same running clothes, so I wouldn't say that's necessarily an important component. As far as running with the dog, I doubt that somebody would come up and start running alongside me if I had a dog with me. I don't think Coda would be about that.
Yeah.
And honestly, Coda's so cute. I feel like she gets more attention than I do when I'm running with her. So there's that component too.
And do you think overall that you get harassed more frequently or less frequently when the dog's with you?
Definitely less. I only notice, mostly it only happens when I don't have the dog with me.
And to be clear for those listening, Coda isn't like a Rottweiler or a Doberman Pinscher. Coda is
like a big, fluffy, lovable dog.
She's not,
Usually when I'm running with her, people are going, "Aww."
She's like an Australian Border Collie mix, something. And she's not intimidating by any standards.
She's not intimidating, but she would definitely jump on someone if she had to for me, I think.
Yeah, dogs are pretty loyal. And Jesse, you started out as 11 Bravo.
Right, yeah.
Which is infantry for those listening. But you ended up being a canine handler. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when you go in the Army, you get this whole designation and stuff. That's what Shaq just mentioned, this whole 11 Bravo. And so I went in as infantry. And, through the Army's awesome administrative government, Like you get voluntold a lot, and that's kind of what happened. And I didn't think I was like an outstanding soldier by any means, and I didn't think like I was squared away. But at the time we were getting ready to deploy, and I made team leader. I had like my own truck. I had my own guys I was in charge of. We were in a heavy weapons company, so like we had these in-house competitions with each other about firing and setting guns up and setting emplacements and spotting and different things like that, and at gunnery. And so like I was in a good place when they came and were like, hey, you're going to go to dog school. I was not excited about it. I was leaving my team. I just got these guys, and there were some new soldiers coming in, and I'd been a team leader for probably 6-8 months, and then went to this dog school. And again, I wasn't by any standard like an outstanding soldier. I wasn't a PT stud. I wasn't necessarily squared away. I was kind of in the middle of the road. You know, I was not out there to win awards or anything like that or anything. It was just what we call in the Army, like I was just Joe, like chewing Slim Jims and drinking Red Bulls and, you know, just trying to make it happen. But all that being said, they picked me, and my platoon sergeant said, hey, you're going to go to this school and you're going to learn how to, you know, be a dog handler. And went to the school, was given a German Shepherd named Nero, who was like 85 pounds, just this giant dog. And at the time I was a lot smaller than I am now. But yeah, so I got the dog and learned how to use him and utilize, like understand his signs and the way he would detect things, and he was trained to detect explosives. And so the idea was that they would take these dogs and give them to certain companies that were doing route clearance, and then we would go out there with the guys on the ground or in the trucks, and we would help assess and kind of go through looking for IEDs or caches or whatever else. And so when Nero and I got paired, everybody was like, you guys are going to fail. You're not going to do so hot. Like the dog is not imprinting on you. You guys aren't doing so well. And then as time went on, we became a pretty good team. And we, for a short time, very short time, like a month, we had the largest cache in Afghanistan. Found some IEDs, you know, had a stellar deployment. Best job by far I've ever had, you know, learning how to work a dog, understand how dogs, mannerism work. Learning how to read the dog, and you know, it's a really symbiotic relationship with when you have a detector dog who's looking for explosives. And so that was kind of my experience. And then, you know, going into deployment, you know, we spent all the time, you know, 24 hours with the dog, just lived in the same room. We had this chew by herself. It's like a Connex that's set up to have a bed and stuff. Excuse me. So Nero and I were living together the entire time. But yeah, so that's pretty much what that looked like or entailed. So the whole infantry thing, like I didn't even do that. I didn't even get to be G.I. Joe. I got to walk a dog pretty much the whole time. So,
right, but a pretty incredible dog.
It was by far best dog I've ever had. Even the dog we have now, it was my idea to get the stupid thing, and then Julia's. It's become Julia's dog, and I'll never have a dog. Like Nero's my dog, and that's kind of where it ends. You know, I won't ever have another dog. But all that to say, like the dog we have now is definitely Julia's.
Yeah. So I see on social media posts all the time, ladies are asking for advice, what people do to be defended when they run. What do they carry for defense? Yeah. A lot of them ask about running with dogs. And so it's been your experience. You do get harassed less with dogs. You've got a lot of experience working with and training dogs. What would you guys say to somebody's out there listening? They're thinking, yeah, I'd like to have a companion to run with, because not a lot of people want to get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning to go run. So maybe people aren't going to work. I'd like to have a dog because they're going to be there at home. They'll go for a run with me. What would you say, is there anything important about selecting the breed of the dog, anything that people need to take into consideration, both of your points of view?
Yeah, I think one is understanding that like a dog only goes so far, right? Like Coda doesn't go on these long runs with Julia. She doesn't do that. The most we get out of her is maybe 7, 8, and that's pushing it, right? With the
2 9 miles with her.
Yeah, and she was pretty much done so after that. But I think as far as breed, I think there's certain dogs that are more apt. You're not going to want to take a French bulldog out and try to run, any amount. But there's certain dogs that are more athletic, and I think climate is a big deal. If you're in Southwest Colorado, it gets hot. It gets hot in the summer. Coda's a hairy dog, probably as hairy as they come next to German Shepherd or any of those big giant dogs. I think their build also helps. If you're trying to run with a big German Shepherd or a Great Dane, I don't think you're going to get as much mileage, but those little dogs seem to be, healers and collies and even retrievers, they seem to do really well. There's articles and articles about good running dogs and different breeds, but in our experience, Coda's a res dog that we found at the pound, right? But she has turned into an awesome running dog with Julia. We keep her trimmed, we keep her hydrated, and do our best to not push her too hard and give her good breaks. But she is far and away, better than Nero ever was at running. Nero hated it, and he would lay down and trying to get an 85-pound German Shepherd to move when it doesn't want to. That's a trick. But I think if you're looking for a dog that is to run with, I think going to the pound and seeing what they have first off, and then kind of going from there, and understanding that the dog works out just like you do, right? So we didn't start Coda out doing 4 or 5 miles. We had to start, 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile, and then build her up into that.
Sure.
And seeing the dog's physique change a little bit too. Mm-hmm. Dogs, when they run, as much as our dog does with Julia, they kind of get puffy. It's weird. They especially Coda's build, they don't really stay lean and thin. But for whatever reason, Coda still keeps up, and she had health issues, and and still seemed to be doing well with everything we're doing her. She's not dead yet, so that's good.
How old is she?
We think 3.5, 4.
Oh yeah, she's got a lot of.
She's got a lot of life. And those res dogs, man, they're built like Ford Rangers.
I feel like she's only gotten better. She's only gotten better at running for sure. And the only breeds of dogs I've ever had are Labs and now Coda, an Australian Shepherd mix. And both of those dogs have been awesome for running with. My Lab was always eager to run with me. Could usually keep up. If she couldn't, she'd just turn around and go home.
Yeah. So I've got 2 dogs. I've got one that's a Heeler Shepherd mix, and she will go all day long. It doesn't matter how far I go. I've had the furthest she's gone with me is 15 miles.
Whoa!
The other one is like part Heeler but part pit, and 9 miles tops.
Yeah.
15 miles?
Yeah,
That's wild. Did you have to keep snacks for her, or what you?
Well, so it was out of Cannonball Mesa, so it's in the desert, right?
Yeah.
So out there, I've got to carry enough water for me, plus enough water for the dogs. Yeah. So I'm going slower, but that doesn't slow them down.
No.
They're just zipping back and forth. And
did you worry about food or anything like that?
I do bring treats with me, a little Ziploc full of dog food. That doesn't add too much weight.
No.
But, I figure if I've got to eat, they've got to eat.
Exactly.
If I got to drink, they got to drink. It's only fair. I mean,
it's wild that, I never thought about that until the first mission I went on in Afghanistan, and I was getting everything loaded up. And I had my backpack on and my butt sack, and I was getting ready to walk out, and I was like, wait, I got to bring food for the dog, water for the dog. I got to bring a bowl for the dog. I got to do all this kind of stuff. And yeah, you don't think about that when you're like, oh, I want to run with the dog, and then you're like, wait, all the stuff I need, they need too.
Yeah, so if you're trail running with a dog, you got to carry your gear, and you either got to carry your dog's gear, or you got to get one of those cool harnesses where they carry their gear.
Yeah, I don't know if that's.
I've never tried that. I always just end up carrying it. But.
There's some that go as far as carrying first aid stuff. Do you practice that, or is that something?
I've got a first aid kit for the dog, but I've never had to use any.
Thank goodness, yeah.
So, and this is kind of shame on me, but I probably ought to learn some about applying first aid to a dog, because I haven't had to do that, fortunately. But you never know when something could happen. Mm-hmm. And so I hear what you're saying a lot about picking up on breeds, right? Like an 85-pound dog may not be an ideal fit for an 85-pound runner.
Right.
And a husky wouldn't be a good fit for, say, Phoenix or Tucson.
Absolutely.
Because that's just cruel. And actually, this time of year, I'm not sure anything would be a good fit for Phoenix.
It's hard. I mean,
I think even in the middle of the night, you can still fry eggs on the concrete there. I don't know that for a fact, so nobody go fact checking me.
Calm down, folks. We don't know.
I'm just saying it could be difficult, but and Julia, your experience running with a dog, you get harassed less, and it doesn't have to be a Doberman, a Saint Bernard, a German Shepherd. Although probably the more intimidating looking the dog is, probably the less likely you are to get harassed. I'm sure there's some merit to that somewhere. What do you two have to say when it comes to training dogs and getting them ready for the run and being obedient? What are some of the things that you think is important? Maybe there's somebody listening, they're running in an urban environment, maybe they've never owned a dog before, they're going to get a dog now and start running. What would you advise that person?
My first point, e-collar, like all day. Coda was super dog aggressive. Quick story, the girls and I, all four of us used to have a guinea pig, and Coda ate our guinea pig, totally destroyed it. There was nothing left, and she was super dog aggressive, little creature aggressive, and so or just hungry. But either way, we got an e-collar, and the mannerisms with her changed, and so she knew, like, okay, I gotta behave. I can't go after bigger. I can't go after dogs. I can't go after other people. And it's not, we weren't cranking that thing to 11 and zapping or anything like that. It makes a noise. Get the one with the tweeter first, and so they accompany the noise with the jolt or something like that. And so that's what we did. And Coda is super well behaved. She pulls a little bit with Julia, but when I run with her, she's very next to me. She heals really well. She doesn't try to go ahead to go back or anything like that. As far as obedience, that's what I would say. But as far as care and prepping her,
people are definitely a controversial topic with the e-collar, but again, we didn't bump it up super high. We both tried it on ourselves first to make sure it wasn't too hard on our necks without fur. And it definitely totally changed the way that she listens to us. And we only had to use it once or twice, and then after that, we haven't put it on her for
it's
over a
under
year.
this thing.
But as far as just running with her, I feel like one thing that's helped me a lot, because she does pull with me a little bit, if I put a harness on her instead of a leash, she does a lot better. I think the compression of it gives her a little bit of peace and kind of calms her a little bit, and then also it's just more comfortable for her. She feels the pressure of me pulling back a little bit better.
It's a little more controlled too.
It's more controlled for me, then I'm not having to yank on it. And as far as like from an occupational therapist standpoint, you're less likely to get yanked with your shoulder if you're holding her by a harness, because it's just easier to control.
That's a great point. And from the dog safety standpoint, it's probably easier to be restrained by your chest than by your
neck. Yeah, you're pulling their head and stuff.
Running harnesses are a good thing to look at. Dogs aren't the only thing that the two of you do for self-defense. We also all go to the same jiu-jitsu gym together. Shout out to Lifer Jiu-Jitsu. And so, Julia, what got you into jiu-jitsu as a female?
Well, one of the biggest things was actually Jesse. He was super interested in jiu-jitsu and martial arts in general. And also I know that he had that component of feeling more safe with me running alone, knowing that I do that a lot if I know a little bit of self-defense at least. And then my mom was reminding me actually recently that back in high school, I was really interested in jiu-jitsu for self-defense because I was starting to run more by myself. And I was wanting to travel a lot and was getting ready to go live abroad in Guatemala for a year. And so I had expressed interest in jiu-jitsu just as a source of self-defense for myself.
Nice. And other than limited capacity, because we're not in the middle of nowhere, but you can see it from here. What makes, in your opinion, jiu-jitsu a better choice than, say, karate or something?
I mean, statistically, they're like, you watch any of these things on YouTube, and it's like 95% of fights go to the ground. And striking's hard on your body. You have to spar. eventually. You got to learn how to do that. Not that jiu-jitsu isn't. I think all of us have had retained injuries in our short career. I mean, you're 3 years. What are you?
I'm 4 years in.
4 years in, yeah.
And
so
I've had some injuries, yes.
yeah. And so I think there's, you're going to sustain injuries no matter what, whether it be running, whether it be, any kind of martial art. But for us, jiu-jitsu was one of those things we looked at, and I've been interested in it from Army combatives, the training I received there. I wasn't super stoked about doing any kind of striking martial art just because I knew eventually I would want to incorporate the girls in our daughters, and I knew that was going to be more intimidating and a harder sell, to them. And so seeing that this was more like wrestling and kind of playing and tying each other up, I think that was a little bit easier. And for Julie and I, this is stuff we can practice essentially with we have gis and we have, the apparel we need, but we don't need gloves. We don't need a bag. We don't need those things, and
Right.
It's nice to have mats, but I mean, soft ground works too. And so that's all stuff that we thought about going into jiu-jitsu, but also jiu-jitsu is, as we all know, it's like restraint, and you're not destroying a person's, body or face or internal organs or anything like that. And I think that's something that, as far as the self-defense perspective, I'm not trying to, totally annihilate this person, rip them apart or anything like that. And if God forbid something does happen, I would rather restrain them and try to hold them, or break something gently. Yeah. And I think that's something that was really appealing with jiu-jitsu, and even more not even away from the self-defense or having some method of self-defense. Jiu-jitsu is good. Like I mean, all of us agree. Like jiu-jitsu is good for us, just like running is, and it's been a a blessing, and it's changed our perspective on parenting, on marriage, on each other in some ways. You really think about,
You learned how tough she was.
Exactly. Yeah, no, like you really learn how to be patient with your wife when you realize she can choke you out. Like, there's like arguments or whatever, and you're like, you just wait till class tonight or whatever else and stuff. So there's stuff like that, and it's been good for us. It really has, and I mean, I'm thankful for life, and I'm thankful for the introduction to jiu-jitsu, and it's one of those things like. Julia's, she's a runner, and it's going to be part of her life for the rest of her life, and jiu-jitsu is going to be part of our life for the rest of our lives, and that's kind of what we've decided to pursue. So.
Yeah, and about the fights going to the ground, if somebody attacks a runner, I don't know what the statistics are, but
Sure.
If I was, going to attack somebody who is running, the natural thing is to trip them or tackle them.
Push them over, yeah.
Like you're going to the ground.
Right, you're not going to square up.
And generally speaking, when a strange male is attacking a female, it's usually with the intent of going to the ground.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
So, Julia, going into a jiu-jitsu class, knowing that you're going to be in some awkward situations, what were you expecting, and then what did you actually experience as a woman?
I can say that I absolutely had no expectations going in because I knew very little, and I did minimal research before going in, partly because I didn't want to be turned off to it, I guess, because I didn't know what to expect. So it was actually a really pleasant surprise when I got there, and first class I had, we met Coach. He introduced me to, let's see, who did I roll with first? Freedom. He introduced me to Freedom. Was like, you're going to be drilling with Freedom today. And made sure that I absolutely knew my triangles and my arm bars and some of my basic stuff before he even allowed me to roll with anybody else. So it was a really slow progression for me, and I felt like there was a lot of intention. Being a female and being a smaller female, there was a lot of attention given towards me, making sure that I was safe and that I didn't get injured.
Like, even so much as like Coach Rex like explaining to the group, like, you need to learn how to be able to roll with Julia without totally destroying her, without tying her in a knot, right? Like,
Or breaking my
or
ribs.
breaking your ribs or something like that. And
Yeah. So I felt very safe and cared for in that environment going in.
Yeah, and I don't know that that's the experience at every jiu-jitsu gym, but I would say if you try a jiu-jitsu gym and that's not the experience, you probably need to look for a different gym. At our gym, our Coach Rex Allen, actually has a rule that if you hurt somebody else, you don't come back until they come back, because he wants you to be able to practice restraint, and that's especially important if you get into a tussle somewhere else. You want to be able to go just far enough to end the situation without yourself getting hurt.
Without permanent consequences even.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you guys aren't just practicing jiu-jitsu alone. You guys brought your daughters along and encouraged them. Tell us about that.
It's good. They like it, and there's times that they don't like it. But I think it's done for us as parents. It's like it's an activity that we all practice, and it's something that we can kind of pace ourselves with and engage with them in. And kids are rowdy, and it's good for them to be rowdy. It's good for them
to get some energy out.
Yeah, get some zoomies out, and it's good for them to learn. Like I've noticed with Riley, she's a lot more wanting to hone in. The older one, she's wanting to hone in on like learning how to do a triangle, learning how to take the back, learning how to do a rear naked choke, learning how to do an arm bar. She's honed in on that. Whereas Jamie, the younger one, she's 7, she is direct and wants to push and push and push and drive into that fight. And so you see their personalities change, and you see them pursuing different avenues of the same sport. And so for us, even when we get back, sometimes we're kind of talking about it, pillow talking, where Jamie did this, Riley did that, and even seeing them roll together, there's a patience with each one, but at the same time too, you see their two styles or their two personalities come out and they engage each other. That's what I've noticed.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, but it's
awesome.
It's been a treat, to see them pursue this and want to. It's hard to get a kid excited about getting sweaty and gross and getting exhausted to a degree, right? And neither of them want to do running. Neither of them want to always do biking. But for whatever reason, jiu-jitsu has been one of those things that they both really, really enjoy. And, sure, they get like to dress up in their gi and they get to do these fun games and stuff. But there's a element of it where it's theirs too, right? Like they get to go on this with us. They're making it their own, and I think that's what's exciting to see more than anything.
Absolutely. And I'm sure at some point, we've got a young kid in our class, young, he's an old kid, a teenager, who's doing very well. He's been practicing for about 5 years now. And I have a feeling his parents have absolute confidence that he's safe when he walks to wherever in town.
Yeah.
And that'd be... hopefully you'll get to experience that same thing, in addition to laying down the laws, no dating till you're a brown belt.
Absolutely, yeah, goes without saying.
But hopefully you'll be able to have that same confidence. Julia, do you feel that jiu-jitsu has improved your confidence for what you would do? You were telling us at the beginning, or maybe it was before we were on camera, or just when we started, that some dude came out and was running next to you for a little bit today. Did you feel more confident that had that gone to the ground, that you would be able to be comfortable in that position and know what to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely did. I mean, as he was running towards me, starting to run next to me, like major triggers were coming out. I didn't feel in danger necessarily, but at the same time, rolling through my mind, I'm eyeballing him, figuring out how tall he is. He's about as tall as I am, and noticing that he can't keep up with me. So I'm already like, okay, I'm in better shape than you. You're already winded just from running across the street to me. But knowing, even when he extended his hand, I'm like, all right, I could use that in my favor. Like, if he did put me to the ground, tripped, instantly try to fling into a triangle or something. But yeah, so Yeah, it definitely does, and I can't not think about it now if somebody approaches me or...
Do you feel like that's a bummer thing? Like you're constantly like...
No, I don't see it as a negative thing because I've had experiences in the past where I've been approached by people or been in unsafe situations and fight or flight kicks in, and that's obviously in your aid. But prior to now, and I'm only a white belt, so I don't know much, but prior to now, I knew nothing. Like I really was relying on fight or flight.
From 0 to now.
Okay, maybe I can outrun this person, or maybe something would kick in, would be able to kick them, and then keep going, or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's what I was relying on before, whereas now I feel confident in my ability to at least know, I would know how to react.
Yeah, and I think what you said about noticing whoever this guy was being out of breath already, one of the beautiful things about jiu-jitsu is when you establish a position, your energy level may be here because you've been running already, and their energy level may be here, but once you get that position, they're going to dwindle their energy while you're conserving yours, and at some point, they're going to run out of energy from struggling. And you know, I think for somebody who's 6, 7, 8 miles in on a run, if they get attacked by someone that's fresh, all they've got to do is get to that safe position, and they can exhaust the other player,
right,
or attacker. I guess it wouldn't be a player in this case.
It's hard to, like you pair up certain things, certain sports or certain activities that go with each other, and seeing running and the amount of cardio it is, and the muscle fatigue, and all these things that incorporate with that, all the things you deal with that, it's similar to jiu-jitsu, but it's not, you're not fatiguing the same thing. Whereas, climbing and running, if you sport climb or anything like that, you fatigue your legs quite a bit with climbing. But when it comes to jiu-jitsu, you're using other parts of your anatomy, and so you're not having to do as much. And I'm not saying the two are the best married couple, but they are one that I've noticed. My running helps my jiu-jitsu, and my jiu-jitsu helps my running.
Yeah.
Not that I run a lot, but when I do, I notice that my jiu-jitsu helps. But all that to say, I think there are certain things that marry well together, and for me, I should say, I think that those two marry well together, running and jiu-jitsu.
I think so too. Being in Southwest Colorado, we have a variety of landscapes, and when we can, or at least me, when I get the opportunity to get out of town, which is not Monday through Friday, I like to get out on the trails and run. Apologies to everybody who's going to see me keep reaching towards this computer. The screen keeps blinking out, and I have to keep putting this back. So apologies to those watching my first attempt at using this device for recording. So
we're back.
We're back again. But anyways, in Southwest Colorado, we have basically, I was joking earlier that we're in the middle of nowhere, but we're actually centrally located everywhere. We're like equal distance to Denver, Salt Lake, Phoenix, Las Vegas, mountains, Albuquerque.
Desert.
We got mountains, desert, canyon all around us, and we can run anywhere. It's like a year-round playground.
It's pretty nice.
In the winter, I can run in the canyons and the desert. In summer, I can get up in the mountains, and it's beautiful. And some of the trail runs around here are absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
I know you guys have done some. We did a half marathon in Mancos with part trail run, part in town.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like it was just enough landscape to where you were like, okay, I got to see it, but there was definitely more pavement where you were like, I'm getting annoyed now.
Yeah.
That was definitely, but it was enough landscape to where you're like, this is nice, and then it went right back to pavement.
Yeah. But there's some great running trails out here. Jesse, I think last fall, or maybe it was early this spring, you got a cool run in Canyons of the Ancients.
Yeah, my brother and I, we ran from I guess that'd be the north to the south.
From the top at Sand Canyon down to Road G.
Yeah, down to Road G, and it's a really great run. It's downhill, and so the goal is to go down and back eventually, but we'll see what that turns into. But it's a really nice run.
Maybe you should go up and back so you get the downhill.
That's not a bad idea.
Because going up those switchbacks is going to suck at the top.
I gotta the switchbacks were gnarly. But I gotta be honest, like that's probably one of my brother and I did that run, And it was one of those ones where, you know, when I run with him, similar to when I run with Julia, like I get to there's this like underlying silent competition a little bit, right? And when we run, it's like we're not trying to outdo each other, but we're trying to make sure each other keep going, right? Like we're trying to, nobody's going to stop. We're going to keep going, even if I'm sucking, even if I'm tired, we're going to keep going. And with him, you know, like we got down and I was feeling real native, and so I like ripped off my shirt and put it on my pack and was like running without my shirt, and I was like, dude, this is what the ancestors did. This is some last Mohicans type stuff, you know, and I was feeling really good, like these walls my people saw and all this kind of stuff. But it was just a really nice landscape to be able to run in, you know, and having those landscapes, I think, change your running on a treadmill blows. Like nobody likes that. Nobody likes
Satan sidewalk.
Yeah, and nobody likes beating pavement or anything like that. Like when you have something that you're seeing and you have landscape, it takes your mind off what's going on, right? And kudos to people that run, you know, treadmill and beat pavement every day. But for me, being out running on trail is always nicer. One, it engages your mind because you're having to watch out for obstacles and things like that. And that's something I learned from Julia. You know, she was big into trail running. But more so than that, it's you're out seeing, you know, for me, like creation and seeing what it looks like and being able to engage in it on a different level. Because when you're hiking, you know, you're stuck and you got a big pack and you're, you know, trying to look at everything. But when you're running, you're having to engage your mind. You're having to, you know, you're physically fatigued, but you're also taking in all this landscape and these picturesque places or visual scenes, visual scapes.
Yeah, and that's great. And what a beautiful trail. And then Julia, on the other end, you're not too far from here. You grew up in Telluride. You and your sisters have done a lot of trail runs up there.
Yes. Yeah, I've done some really nice ones up there. There's one called the Snuffles Highland Trail that I just did in the fall. I think it was fall with my sister Sarah, who's a killer runner. And it's a 13-mile loop.
Was that kind of like the competition with Jesse and his brother?
Yes, she has always been a very competitive one. And I think in the recent years, I have stopped trying to compete with her. Although now we're starting
You're outdoing her
and maybe that's why I'm not competing with her anymore. No, she can still outrun me any day. But yeah, it was a 13-mile loop. It goes up to, I want to say somewhere in the 12 to 13,000
It's high.
range. It's pretty high. Beautiful, beautiful terrain though. It's like one of the prettiest runs, and it's not like your traditional hike where there's almost too much. It's not too rooty and rocky, you know. You can actually get the flow. It gets hard when you get to the top because there's little oxygen, but then coming down is awesome. And then you run into town and the river's right there so you can jump in. Mm-hmm. That's a really good one. That's one of my favorites to do with my sister. I've done that one twice with her.
Nice. Yeah. So you guys go out on trails sometimes as a family. There's a statistics that I'm going to be bringing up a lot, but trail runners that go missing, and we've had several in our area. After 24 hours, survivability rate statistically is 0.
Wow.
Like they don't come back. And yeah, so I can show you in the lost person behavior book. So what would your recommendation be for trail runners? Like, I think some of the obvious reasons that the survivability is so low is because of what they carry with them or don't carry with them, actually. So what advice would you give to trail runners when they head out for themselves, and then, you know, for their dogs, if they're going to take some of what they've heard on this podcast, start implementing it, they're going to get a trail dog. Maybe they're only planning to go in 10K and come back out 10K, so they're going 12.4 miles. They've got a plan, but they could get lost, they could get injured. What's your advice for those types when you go out on a trail? What would you think?
The longer the run, the more factors come into play, right? You got time, you got weather, you got things like that. Here in Southwest Colorado, the weather changes quickly. You know, I think for us, one of the big things is like knowing your route and communicating that. Like, it's fun to just be like, all right, I'm going for a run, and then just taking off. Like, that's fun. But the reality of it is like, you got to tell somebody where you're at. You got to tell somebody where you're going and I think that's key. That's number one. So when Julia goes on these long runs, we just had one not too long ago. We went up there to transfer, and she was going to go 13 or
just 9 on that one.
Just 9. And we had a route planned, and we're like, okay, you're going to go this way, and I was going to go down by the creek and fly fish, or try to fly fish. And so we knew where each other were, and we knew what she was doing and how she was planned it out and where she was going to be going. And I think that's something that is pivotal, right? Like on those longer runs, you have to take more caution and understand that there's like bailout points that you might have to hit, right? And in this most recent case with this guy that went missing, I don't know, they knew where he was going, but I don't know that they had a route planned, right? I don't know that they had something, and it's hard to speculate. But all that to say, I think communication is number one. As far as, you can carry everything like from a flare gun to try to signal where you're at, but reality is that like if you're comfortable in the backcountry, you should be fairly adept to be okay, right? Like carry a light layer, carry stuff to be able to make a fire, carry some, at least a candy bar along with your caffeine jelly beans, or something like that. Each one of those ups your statistics from being able to survive. And I think those are all things that are important. And knowing where you're at too. If you haven't been to a certain area, maybe it's not the best to go, 12 miles in. If you're like, I don't really know this trail, but it seems well marked. It's like, maybe do this 6 mile 4 times and then be okay, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. And I think it's fair to say that at a full run, you're more likely to miss the next turn.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And especially in some of our trails, like they don't always get well marked. What's been your experience? What do you feel like is the number one? A whistle?
I can't say that I've carried a whistle with me, honestly. But I would agree with the communication thing. I think that's a huge one. I think some of the cases of people getting lost or missing is they maybe give a general area, but maybe not specifics of where they're going to be. And as I have started going out on longer trail runs, especially alone or with the dog, I have started to realize the importance of making sure somebody knows, usually Jesse knows exactly where I'm going to be, make sure we both know the route, so that if something were to happen, even if, God forbid you get a sprained or broken ankle, you're going to have a really hard time getting back down. So,
and that's fair. You've only got, a 10K both ways, 6 miles. You can do that. You do that sometimes before jiu-jitsu, 13-mile run. But 6 miles is a whole different animal on an uneven terrain with a sprained ankle.
When it's raining. Right, or
almost dark.
Bad weather or whatever else, with a dog that's chasing a squirrel.
Yeah.
But all that to say, I think there's certain things that just we all preach common sense, but the reality of it is like you have to think about it in the simplistic as possible, right? Like, okay, this person knows where I'm going. Especially some of these runs, like her 13, 14 mile runs, they're going to be 2 hours plus, right? That's 2 hours where you're just looking at a dot trying to track where she's at, right? Or trying to understand, okay, 2 hours have passed, she should be here, right? And it only gets longer the farther she goes. And so you kind of have to understand, like, one, knowing your runner's pace too. Like, she's pretty quick. And so trying to track that and understand it. When we were up at that transfer one, she went out and I started coming up. And I was like, she should be, and we hit it pretty close. We were pretty close, but knowing each other pretty well to know that, like, okay, there's an uphill, and this is usually her pace when she's running on the trail or whatever else. I think those all play a factor too, and trying to, and knowing the terrain is a big deal too, where you're not going to be jumping over logs and trying to jump over creeks and stuff like that. Do you feel like you slow it down a little bit when you...
I slow it down when I'm trail running.
Yeah, I do too. I don't think there's a way to avoid it. Like,
partly,
running on Empire versus running
right.
And even too, all the stories you've told me and that statistic alone has made me aware of slowing my pace down quite a bit because I don't want to run on my reserves.
Right.
I'm like, okay, if I know I'm going like that run 9 miles, it's like, okay, I'm going to slow it down, especially for the uphill. I haven't gone on this trail before. It was an easy trail, but it was the whole first half was uphill.
Right.
So I was kind of trying to monitor my pace. It was like, okay, if I feel good at the halfway point, then I can pick up my speed on the way down.
Right.
But also I had the dog with me, and she couldn't.
And
go
again,
too fast.
we're talking like these aren't these, I don't know who's listening to this, but if you're like an ultra marathon runner or whatever else, like you know what you need to do and you know how to do it, right? Like you understand that. We're talking for people who are like entry level, like I don't know, Julia and I are right above entry level maybe. Shaq's like above that, right? And so we're not trying to talk to you people who are like, oh no, you just need a goo bar and you're fine.
I was up by Madden Peak, which is right when you get to the county line with La Plata and you turn off to the left there at the top of Mancos Hill. Last year we were up there snowshoeing, and there was a guy running, I don't know where from, but we walked 4 miles in and 4 miles back. And on the way back, he passed us, and we never saw him on the way up, so he was at least more than 4 miles in.
Sure.
This is in January, bright sunny day. It's like 40-something degrees, feels great during the day. He's wearing short shorts, a pair of shoes, a Camelback with no shirt. I assume his shirt was in it. And I'm like, dude, if something happened out here, like it's going to be negative 20 tonight, and you're going to be in trouble. One of the things that I carry with me is, in addition to my hydration bladder, unlike a lot of people, I carry a metal water bottle.
Really? Wow. Oh.
Because you can tell I've had this in the fire a couple times. I can burn water in it. Plus, it's got water in it now, so I won't demonstrate, but I can bang on that for a signal device.
Sure,
And it doesn't sound like anything else in the woods. And
Little
this sticker has held up really well to the point. So that's the one I carry on camping.
It's smart. It's an addition to the bladder. I have a good sized bladder as well, but I would go through it for sure.
I also recommend the Grail water filters. They're kind of
they're
pricey,
nice. We got 2 of those. Those are sweet.
They don't weigh anything empty, but if you run out of water, man, you can get clean water just like that out of any water source. So
and those are all things like, again, if you're doing those super gnarly runs or anything like that, or even just your hiking, you kind of
it's smart to pack something like that along. You never know.
Yeah, it's just like anything.
What would you recommend? And Jesse, you hit on some of this a little earlier, talking about Afghanistan. But if you're going out trail running with a dog, you're not just thinking about your own survival. You're thinking about the dog's survival. What kind of things do you think about for that?
I mean, I think sprains and things like that. You're not usually going to get a GSW or anything like that on a a trail run. If you do, you went the wrong place. But all that to say, like, I think that there's certain things that you should have. The tape is always good, some painkillers, and then like something to be able to make a splint with. They make these awesome Sam splint stuff, that folds up.
They make that for dogs too?
For dogs, okay, so for dogs it's completely different because dogs, they don't hydrate like we do. You can take, if you're ballsy enough, you can take a saline bag and a needle and stick that in the dog's back, and it's going to hydrate off that. A good way to check your dog's hydration is in their gums. If you press on their gum like your fingernail pad, you can press on that. You can see as the color comes back. That's a good one. And then on their backside near their, what would be our crotch, near their genitalia, you fill up in there, you can feel their pulse. That's another good one. But just be checking on your dog as much as possible. There's countless resources online about how to deal with your dog or whatever else. But as far as first aid for your dog, there's a gnarly podcast that I listened to about a dog getting bit by a rattlesnake, which was like god awful. And so that's nothing I've ever thought about, but that's something to consider, where you're running, where you're going, things like that. If your dog's dog aggressive too, if you run across an animal that is formidable, a mountain lion, a bear, a badger, a big raccoon, whatever, there's likelihood your dog's going to go after it. And so being able to deal with that, and having some kind of antibiotic on you or puncture stuff or gauze or something like that, and being able to treat some kind of dog wound is probably a good idea. But most of all, I think tape. Like, you can make gauze out of a t-shirt, you can make gauze out of shorts, chonies, whatever, sock. But if you don't have any way to adhere it, you're going to be stuck in it. So tape is a good one to just carry around. I think that's like that just comes from being, my dad's son and being like duct tape fixes everything. So it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I carry a small, just the 1-inch wide roll of Gorilla Tape in my pack. It doesn't weigh anything, but you can fix anything.
You can fix it. You can put stuff back together with tape.
And here's another thing: if you can't find any dry tinder, that stuff will catch on fire like none other.
Yeah.
So if you have to start a fire, that duct tape is dry tinder for you when you can't find anything else.
Thankfully, we've never had to deal with an injury, from either of us. We've had like little slips or like, I don't know, if you run trail, like eventually you're going to just eat shit. You're just running, you're thinking about how awesome the world is and how great this run feels, and then bam, and then you're on. And if you're like me, you always catch with your hands, and you get rocks or, pine needles or whatever else in your hands. So getting those chewed up always sucks, or knees, and I've bashed my knees on stuff. And
I have bashed my knees a couple of times.
Yeah.
And have you found it to be your experience, or have you noticed professionally that when people do fall and catch themselves, they tend to catch themselves on the dominant hand?
Yeah, I mean, I do, but
not always, honestly. A lot of times, yes, a lot of times this does tend to be the dominant side, but a lot of times it starts with the non-dominant side too. And a lot of times that just comes because your non-dominant side is weaker, so it's more prone to injury.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen a solid mixture. It wouldn't be as common dominant side. I don't know what the statistics are. Probably you are more likely to injure your dominant side, but definitely both. People, like he was saying, tend to catch themselves like this, which is the worst possible way to catch yourself, because then you can have a wrist injury, elbow injury, shoulder injury.
Soak it up with your face.
Or try to turn in the moment.
Yeah. Take it with your teeth.
Take it with your teeth.
Yeah, take it with your teeth.
Yeah. But maybe something I should practice, or we should practice, or people in general should practice that I don't generally is, when's the last time you tried to use your Grail filter or start a fire with your non-dominant hand?
Yeah.
It might be a good practice.
That's a good point.
That'll be a good challenge sometime.
Yeah.
Let's see who can start a fire.
Let's take this into a club behind your back and see what you can do.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think I do well with that. Yeah.
Definitely interesting to think about. So, any last words of advice that you would give for people running as a couple, getting into running, selecting dogs, finding a way to honor the people who can't run, or the native people of this land? Any advice you want to throw out there before we end?
If you're going to run with your partner, get past the competition thing and just realize it's going to be okay. If you're both active, just get past the competition thing. You're both doing this because you love it. You're both doing it because it's good for you, and you both want to live as long as possible and enjoy each other's company as long as possible.
Yeah.
Everything's easier when you got a partner. As far as the Army thing, veterans get plenty, dude. They got a whole day, they're good. We don't need to say thank you, man. And then as far as being native, just get out and run. Just, that's how you honor as much as people as you can. Go run and go do jitsu. What do you got?
I think the best piece of advice I have is that the hardest thing is just to put your shoes on and step outside. Once you're outside, you go. It's the hardest part. Pretty sure that's what David Goggins says.
Is that what he said?
I don't know.
It probably is.
Seems
The
like
hardest part is
say.
just staring at those shoes until you get going.
I think that is the hardest part, is getting home, looking at the shoes, and you have a choice, but as soon as you make the choice, that's the biggest step,
Yeah. That's a good point.
Once you're out there, you're committed, even if you're not loving it.
That's a good point. Once you're out there and you're 2 miles in, you're either gonna make that a 4 mile run, or you're just gonna,
you're gonna make it a 2 mile run and a 2 mile walk. Twice the time.
That's good. Huh?
But to be fair, 2 miles walked is still just as far as 2 miles ran.
There you go.
You're gonna do it once you're out there.
So.
That's what I have that happen to me all the time. I'll get out there in Carpenter and I'll look at my tracker and it'll be 2.5, something like that. And I'm like, well, I'm halfway here. Might as well do it, you know?
You got to keep going now.
Gotta keep going anyway.
Yeah, well, and to all of you out there, thank you guys, and you guys make sure that you keep coming back safely.